What do you see your purpose as? Many people think, why is UKIP continuing when it's basically achieved its aim?
Well, firstly, I got the biggest mandate in the history of the party to become the leader of UKIP. And have we achieved our aim? Do we really have Brexit? You know, we've got the Supreme Court case today. We seem to have the Conservatives now beginning to backslide and talk about a membership fee, which means that the indicate will stay in the single market. You've got a Labour Party, which I don't believe represents working class people anymore. I think we've got great opportunities to help shape the country that we want to see beyond Brexit.
Why would you have an issue with Parliament voting on this issue? Because the point of our parliamentary democracy, of course, is that, you know, MPs are elected as our representatives and scrutinise anything that happens.
Because the British Parliament made it perfectly clear that they were ceding the democratic right on this issue to the people. And that's why we had a referendum, and the people have spoken quite clearly by a big majority. I heard people say, oh, there was only a small majority. It was a city the size of Liverpool and Birmingham put together, the difference between leave and remain. So there's a big majority to leave, the people have spoken, and the government now should enact the will of the people.
Don't you have a problem with this in that you have won the argument in the sense that we are going to leave the EU, but now it is down to MPs, and perhaps as a result of what happens in the Supreme Court this week, it will definitely be down to MPs to decide how that happens. And the problem for your party is you only have one MP.
Well, firstly, you don't have to have members of Parliament to influence things. And we didn't have one single member of Parliament when we forced the then Prime Minister David Cameron to hold this referendum against his will. So, you know, just because you have backsides on the green leather doesn't necessarily mean influence. Look, this all depends...
Parliamentary debate is exactly where all of this detail is thrashed out, though, isn't it? And that's your problem. You don't have that influence within Parliament.
Parliament ceded the right to the people on this issue, and it was made perfectly clear during the referendum by the Prime Minister David Cameron, by George Osborne, the then Chancellor, by Philip Hammond, who was then the Foreign Secretary, that leaving the European Union meant leaving the single market. The British people have spoken on June the 23rd.
Well, actually, the question wasn't about whether to leave the single market, was it? It was about whether you wanted to stay or remain in the European Union.
No.
Because actually, a lot of what we talked about in the run-up to the referendum wasn't clear.
Hang on.
And in fact, a lot of it has emerged afterwards wasn't actually what we were promised or warned about.
I don't buy that, actually. It was made perfectly clear during the referendum that if you were voting to leave, you were voting to take back control of your borders, control of your own finances, allowing us to sign our own trade deals and not complying with EU regulations and directives. If we stay in the single market, we can do none of those things.
Okay, but another thing, another person who was sitting here, your former leader, Nigel Farage, another thing that was made clear to a lot of people was that £350 million a week would go into the NHS. He sat here the morning of the referendum result and said that that was a mistake.
Well, that was never a figure that UKIP actually used.
No, but my point is there's plenty of things that people thought were clear before the referendum turned out to be as clear as mud.
Well, hang on. Well, if you look at what the other side was saying, they were saying the economy was going to fall off a cliff, that there'd have to be an emergency budget.
Exactly.
Right,
things that we thought we were voting for before the referendum have turned out not to be the case. So it is down to MPs to discuss.
No. We can conflate this all we want. It was perfectly clear that on June the 23rd, people voted to leave the European Union to take back control.
Okay,
that was the simple vote that took place.
Let me ask you this. If the Supreme Court uphold the findings of the High Court, which is highly likely, and they say it has to revert to Parliament, will you accept that?
Well, of course it's got to be accepted. We have an independent judiciary, but woe betide any MP who tries to play with this, or any political party, and add amendments to any sort of bill to ensure that we stay in a single market, particularly if you're an MP whose constituency has voted to leave, and you play around with this.
But wasn't the sovereignty of Parliament, and indeed the sovereignty of our judiciary, wasn't that a key cornerstone, really, of the ethos of UKIP, which is the reason we need to get out of Europe is so we can be ruled by our judges and have the sovereignty of our Parliament. There isn't there, a kind of weird contradiction going on here, where the Leave Brigade don't like this because they're twitchy about what it means about Brexit, and yet at the same time what they really want to do is kind of ignore or usurp the will of a sovereign Parliament. Why?
Well, hang on. I'll correct you on one thing first. You said leave Europe. None of us want to leave Europe. We want to leave the European Union. Don't conflate the two.
I
Look, the British people have spoken. Parliament ceded the democratic right to the British people voted to leave. Now what you've got is a bunch of people who don't want to accept the will of the people, and they're trying to play silly games.
Yeah, but hang on. Nobody, use your phrase, hang on.
Yeah.
Nobody expect. You say that a lot, by the way.
I'm sorry, I'll
you have to stop telling people to hang on. Here's what nobody expects to happen, because it's not going to happen. Yeah. If it reverts to Parliament, as is very likely, Parliament is not going to overturn the vote on Brexit. It's not about a vote on Brexit. The will of the people at that referendum is going to continue. All that's going to change is Parliament will debate it. And is that not healthy for our democratic process, particularly in these uncertain times, that our sovereign Parliament should actually be debating it?
Parliament, or certain MPs, will attempt to water it down. OK? Water down the vote on June the 23rd. And certain MPs, I suspect some within the Labour Party and within the Conservatives, certainly with the Lib Dems, who want to see a second referendum because they don't accept the result, will try to keep us in the single market. When it was clear...
9 Liberal Democrat MPs.
Hang on. It was clear that the British people voted to leave the European Union, to take back all the things such as control of borders, control of finance, control of laws, all those things that you can't do if you stay in the single market.